Okay, folks, I think we're going to begin. So welcome to our audience in person here in Martinos Auditorium in the Granoff Center for the Creative Arts at Brown University, as well as to our virtual audience, wherever you live. We are glad you are joining us for the Reexamining Conservation Exhibition and Symposium, presented by the Brown Arts Institute and Creature Conserve. And reminder that tomorrow is Earth Day, so happy Earth Day to the Earth. I'm Connie Crawford. I teach acting and directing here in the TAPS, the Theater Arts Department at Brown University. I also am the Marcia West Director in Residence at the Rights and Reason Theater in Africana Studies. Please join me now in remembering that Brown University is located in Providence, Rhode Island, on lands which are within the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe. We acknowledge that the Narragansett Indian tribe was dispossessed from their lands by the forces of settler colonialism, and we acknowledge that our ongoing responsibility to understand and respond to the legacy of those actions. We acknowledge that the Narragansett and other indigenous peoples have called Providence home for centuries and continue to do so today. We acknowledge with humility and respect the Narragansett Indian tribe, whose ancestors stewarded these lands with great care. And we commit to working together to honor our past and build our future with truth. I hope that everyone has a chance to explore the Reexamining Conservation questions at the intersection of the arts and sciences art exhibition installed here in this building in our Cohen and Atrium galleries. The exhibition is curated by Heather McMorty, Creature Conserve Arts Curator, with support from Haley Johnson and Lindsay Montanari, Creature Conserve curatorial scholars. It is free and open to the public through June 10th, and an audio tour is also available via the exhibition website. The exhibition is also accompanied by a reading room with a selection of texts compiled by Susan Tassant, Creature Conserve Writer in Residence, and Lisa Kahn-Schnell, Creature Conserve Mentor. Our deepest thanks to Dr. Lucy Spellman and her team at Creature Conserve, the Tamaquag Museum's Indigenous Empowerment Network, and the Brown Animal Studies Group. Also thanks to Talia Field, the faculty director of the Brown Arts Institute, and to the staff of the BAI who have made these events possible. And if we could please give the staff who have worked all day long a round of applause. They're juggling so much. Tonight's event's going to be hybrid, so good luck to us all. We're delighted to be partnering with the Brown University Bookstore, who is carrying titles authored by many of our symposium participants, including Linda Hogan. And the Brown Bookstore is offering a 20% discount on purchases of those titles between now and Saturday, April 23rd, tomorrow. And now, for tonight's program, we are delighted to share virtual space this evening with internationally recognized public reader, speaker, and writer of poetry, fiction, and essays, Linda Hogan. Linda is former faculty at Indian Arts Institute, writer in residence for the Chickasaw Nation, and professor emerita from the University of Colorado. In July 2014, Dark, Sweet, a collection of new and selected poems, was published from Coffee House Press. Her other books include Indios, Rounding the Human Corners, and the well-regarded novel, People of the Whale. Linda is the recipient of the Oklahoma Book Award, the Mountains and Plains Book Award, and a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Following a reading of her work, Linda will be in conversation with Olivia Maliszewski, a senior here at Brown University. So, virtual and corporeal participants, please join me in welcoming Linda Hogan to the virtual stage.
Hello, it's good to be here. And I would like to acknowledge all of the Indigenous writers between us. Um, I'm in a new space, so I don't know how it works, but I had a light on so that you could see the painting behind me, which is the animals declaring war on the humans. Let me see if I can move that. They're dancing around a fire and they're dressed in full regalia. I really like that turtle. That's our clan. And so tonight, because of the amount of time we have and the fact that I'm going to do an interview when we're finished with this or a conversation, I thought that I would read only poetry and no essays or fiction. So the first thing that I'm going to read is called Eagle Feather Prayer, and I like to begin with that. It's thundering here. I hope we stay on. I thank the eagle and old mother for this prayer I send to earth and sky and to the sacred waters. I thank old mother and the golden eagle. They are the ones who taught me to pray with no words. They taught me the part of me that is unnamed by anatomy books. And so I stand here, facing you and the rest of creation, also with secret names. I send this prayer thanking those who risk their lives for clean, sweet water. And once again, there is the great silence of what happened to the buffalo. And so hard it is to pray for the shooters who laughed about hitting the girl with one good shot. We love our horses. We love the dogs who helped us. We love the wilderness of buffalo herds. We are humans who love, but I don't know what they are, the shooters, or their purpose for being. With no words, just part of my named self, I hold this fan from old mother and the eagle. With all my strength, I send this prayer, so very silent, so very silent. I'm losing my glasses, so there they are. The next one is The Wolves Outside. I wanted to say about that I really was taught by a golden eagle. I worked with birds of prey, and we did have an eagle that was there, and she could not grow high, fly high. So she was close to the ground and would always groom my hair when I was trying to pick up whatever was around her on the ground. And she taught me the way of being, that I had to behave a certain way when I went inside her area, or she would be distressed and nervous. And so to keep the birds calm, I always had to stand outside for a moment and make sure that I was, I guess you would say, together and calm and peaceful. Outside my cabin, the day the buffalo appeared where I lived with wild horses, I thought they are clearing the land again for ranches after the old growth, as they did clear us away. Then the wild horses, then the wolves, now the wolves. Recently, a pack came down from the Yellowstone fire, 5 ghostly presences floating across the snow. No one believed me at first, and that was good because no shooters saw them here. It was as if they were transparent, but the ghostly animals killed a deer outside my window. I followed the blood, a thinning trail to the pink, chewed bones, only teeth marks still on them. Later, I returned from work to find they had attacked an elk. When I stepped forward, they disappeared so quickly into the wind-blown snow, but the still living elk remained close with the horses until it healed. I was its protector. Then it was gone. I tell no one about the buffalo living here now because I know what they would do. You ask why they would do it. I think it is in their blood to leave a forest of cleared trees, a wake of red, as if they can or can't help themselves. I had an order for reading these, but I'm going to skip around a little. I was going to skip around a little, but it's a little bit difficult here. The current veins of history are open as worlds and borders redefine themselves. We wish for some new seed of vision so the world may grow, if only for a moment, silent, wordless, and fresh, as a bare room with windows open. Friend, even you I may never know. Some of us alike, we are all in the same current of life, each with our one-celled beginning, each primordial life opening to keep us out toward years of life, with stories of those who birthed us, we hope flowing with love, even with childhoods of hurt from being human. And for a time it all seems fine. In the moment of stopping in the room safe with curtain billowing, for just this moment, can't we touch one another and ask about our lives? Even the earth knows these veins that run like rivers of sweet water into countries, great one day, gone the next, or flowing into one another to create something new. As we are silent in this moment, to be a friend, no weapon, not even arrows of words, just easy human waters together, and be like the animal that opens hardness and carries inside a pearl or a goddess that steps out to a new human accord. Mountain lion. She lives on the dangerous side of the clearing, in the yellow-eyed shadow of a darker fear. We have seen each other inside mortal dusk. And what passed between us was the road ghosts travel when they cannot rest in the land of the terrible other. Red spirits of hunters walked between us, from the place where blood goes back to its wound before fire, before weapons. Nothing was hidden in our eyes. I was the wild thing she had learned to fear. Her power lived in a dream of my leaving. It was the same way I have looked so many times at others in clear light before lowering my eyes and turning away from what lives inside those who have found two worlds cannot live inside a single vision. Bear fat. These are all in honor of animals, and I'd like to make sure that for Animal Day I keep it as much that way as I can. When the old man rubbed my back with bear fat, I dreamed the winter horses had eaten the bark off trees and the tails of one another. I slept a hole into my own hunger that once ate lard and bread from a skillet seasoned with salt. Fat was the light I saw through the eyes of the bear. 3 bony dogs leading men into the grass-lined cave of sleep to kill hunger as it slept itself thin. They grew fat with the swallowed grease. They ate even the wood ashes after the fire died. And when they slept, did they remember back to when they were wolves. I am afraid of the future, as if I am the bear turned in the stomach of needy men, as the wolf become a dog that will turn against itself, remembering what wilderness was before the crack of a gun, before the men tried to kill it or tame it or tried to make it love them. This one from the same collection. This is from the Book of Medicines. It's naming the animals. After the words that called legs, hands, the body of man out of clay and sleep, after the forgotten voyages of his own dreaming, the forgotten clay of his beginnings, after nakedness and fear of something larger, these he named: wolf, bear, other, as if they had not been there before his words, had not other names and tongues and powers, or sung themselves into life before him. These he sent crawling into wilderness he could not enter, swimming into untamed waters. He could hear their voices at night and tracks and breathing, at the fierce edge of forest where all things knew the names for themselves, and no man speaks them or takes away their tongue. His children would call us pigs. I am a pig, a child of pigs, wild in this land of their leavings, drinking from water that burns, at the edge of a savage country of law and order. I am naked, I am old before the speaking, before any Adam's forgotten dream. and there are no edges to the names, no beginning, no end. From somewhere I can't speak or tell, my stolen powers hold out their hands and sing me through. Turtles of the Gulf. I'm changing the title. Turtle Watchers. Old Mother at water's edge used to bow down to them, the turtles coming in from the sea, their many eggs, their eyes streaming water like tears, and I'd see it all, Old Mother as if in prayer. The turtles called back to where they were both, the hungry watchers, standing at the edge of trees, hoping for food when darkness gathers. Years later, swimming in murky waters, a sea turtle swam beside me, both of us watching as if clasped together in the lineage of the same world, the sweep of the same current, even rising for a breath of air at the same time, still watching. My ancestors call them the keepers of doors, and the shore a realm to other worlds, both ways. Water moves the shift of night, of life, back to birth and before, as if there is a path where beings truly meet, as if I am rounding the human corners. Do you still want to hear Turtles of the Gulf? Everything is so contemporary that all of these are very old poems in this book, and yet they're the same as they were, as they are today. Well, you're not going to hear it, I guess, tonight because I keep looking for the page number I wrote down earlier and it's not there. So I'm going to do Rounding the Human Corners. Nothing is on the page it said in the front of the book. The creations of water and light. At night, when the ocean is full of its own created light, the luminescent eel, the manta ray, the swimming together minions of the small. At night, when we are carried in the waters of this world that existed before any of the gods created earthlight or winged creatures, I look through the relative darkness and see the fire of plankton around your body in the pure grace of shining light. Fire and water are two elements unlikely to join. Still, one sometimes comes of the other, as when the body creates its waters from the fire of sexual yearning, and when the ocean reveals her light-bearing creatures in the silken waters that carry us. At night, when the ocean is teeming with the eggs some creature has entrusted to the sea, I remember how the body goes into itself at that moment between breaths, when it seems the tide of the body might pull away before it comes back again. In the human body, it is said, the gods of the ocean live below the navel, in the muscles that move like waves of their own accord. And when the bodies are together, skin against skin, we can say we remember how ocean was formed. We can say we knew it at the beginning of time, the first element, when something like gods or makers fell into each other, cell by cell, cell to cell, and became something newly created. The heron. I am always watching the single heron at its place, alone at water, its open eye, one leg lifted or waiting without seeming to move. It is a mystery, seen but never touched until this morning, when I lift it from its side where it lays breathing. I know the beak that could attack, that unwavering golden eye, seeing me, my own, saying, I am harmless. But if I had that eye, nothing would be safe. The claws hold tight to my hand, its dun brown feathers and the gray so perfectly laid down. The bird is more beautiful than my hand, skin more graceful than my foot. My own dark eye, so much more vulnerable, the heart beating quickly, its own language speaking. You could kill me or help me. I know you, and I have no choice but to give myself up. And in whatever supremacy of this moment, hold your human hand with my bent claws. This America, fields not ours, the tree-lined roads with nothing behind them, as if to hide absence, clearings, the hours you can't go on and do. And then there are those helpless, there are those who keep rabbits pinned with a lock. I am walking in the world of insects, the America of the caged, all in circles, the gnats in streetlights all brightened, and the June bugs at the sewn screens, the dogs in cages waiting to fight, the dirty feet of my past that still walk on these roads. What can I call this land of the religious? What can be said but Jesus washed the feet of the poor and tired and sick? I call this love. He would not have swerved a car to kill that dog, that turtle, that cat. And at night the tree trunks would be holy candles instead of gone. They would be candles in the bodies of thick forests, still alive, nothing cleared for the cattle. And the old turtle I saw yesterday walking across the hot road over what must have looked like water by day, a mirage, and the man who tried to run over it, how I hated him, how it made me violent as him, to him. But oh, the smell of crushed mint held to me as I see that turtle survived and I carried him, big, heavy, peeing, to the other side of the road of this America. I'll finish with this last one called The Eyes of the Animals. Looking into the eyes of the elephant, I am looking also into the eyes of the great land tortoise, with its life more than 100 years, and I see the sand, the salt water from those eyes, the mouth, claws, flippers, hoof, trunk, all on the way to any water across a changed world where nothing is familiar. And looking into the eyes of the mountain gorilla infant, holding green bamboo with her black hands, fingernails so perfect, the eyes look back at me, so unwillingly gentle and alive, so unable to say, take me out of this fur, as the turtle cannot say, take from me the great shell, or the elephant its tusk or hoof. It would say, I am light, kind, I am the same as you. I see the red eyes of the tree frog falling, climbing with yellow webbed feet, hanging on, calling out for rain. Dear life, let's you and I talk about the orangutan surrounded by shining fur, all amber jewel, shining golden eyes, copper arms stretched thin, open, reaching, holding the emerald plant and the light of morning. A diamond cutter could not make anything so great as needy and needed, so desired and desirable as this red ruby of a child. So, dear life, protect this world. Look into the eyes of the whale. There are no words a man can speak as great as theirs. And then there are the eyes of the wolf. A god was named for them. And when you see any of these, you know all they want is to live, to survive, to care for their playful young, just as we do, knowing God is not who or what or anything, but all this, life. Even the circle of fern is unfolding, and the eyes of the universe look back at you with the true knowledge of what you are, saying, human, woman, man, child, this world, even yourself, you must learn to love. Thank you. I always want to tell everything about every poem and why it exists, but there isn't time for that ever in any reading anymore. So I will just end with all of us, we must learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for that generous sharing. And now, please allow me to introduce Olivia Maliszewski, who will engage with Linda and then facilitate a question and answer with our audiences. For our virtual audience, feel free to drop questions into the Q&A feature in the webinar, and we will address as many of them as possible. So, Olivia Maliszewski is a senior at Brown University, studying science, technology, and society, with a focus on biology, visual arts, and Indigenous studies. A member of the Rappahannock tribe, she is most passionate about art, decolonizing environmental conservation, sexuality, gender roles, and feminism, and much of her own artwork centers around these topics. So welcome, Olivia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Hi, Linda. So let's just get started with the questions right away. I'm going to ask a couple questions to Linda, and then I'll open it up for questions from our audiences. So just starting out with a very general first question for you, Linda. Are there any particular conservation topics that are at the front of your mind that you would like to start off with tonight talking about?
I'm sorry, Olivia, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I can speak up. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I just said the first question is a bit of a general one. Are there any conservation topics that are at the front of your mind right now that you'd like to begin the conversation with?
Numerous ones, yes, of course. I think what I maybe mentioned to you at one point was that I was very concerned about, well, the war of the animals, the painting behind me, on the humans. That back in the 1980s, I was reading a magazine. I think it was the New Yorker, or it could have been the New York Times. It was a New York magazine. And one of the things that they talked about was that they were deforesting and burning forests, cut and burn and slash. And that as the forest died, they were releasing diseases and viruses and bacteria into the world that was making people in those areas sick at the same time that they were killing all of the antidotes that the people knew. The indigenous people knew the antidotes in those areas. And so none of them were left. And one of the things I think we probably need to think about is how that's the same thing that's happening now. That was in 1980 that I read that. It could have been going on for many years before, because there had been great numbers of mining. This COVID that we have now began with something that I had never imagined, which is wet markets with endangered species, animals that hadn't been seen before from deep forests and caves, and people wanting to eat them. And that those viruses will always be transforming themselves and changing, because that's what they do once they're out there. And so the cures for those we might have available more easily had we not destroyed the area that they came from. And that's one of the conservation things that I'm very concerned about right now.
Absolutely.
Number of deforestation, the large number of rainforests being ruined.
Right. I completely agree.
Hundreds of others.
As a Native person, could you talk a little bit about your relationship with the land and why your work is so important to you?
Well, I was born this way, actually. So were other people, and maybe not just Indigenous people, but I was always, as you can tell, I was always writing about animals from my very first book, because I was reading, the last poems were very early poetry that I wrote. And that's been my main concern all along. And I think one of the things that I studied when I worked for the tribal nation was a lot of history. I went to repatriations. I had a lot of experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And one thing that I understand and have studied is our earliest histories as observed not by historians, not by anthropologists, but by outsiders, and how we really understood the environment, even sanitation for human beings. And we didn't have the common historical words like kings and queens and warriors and the things that came from Europe. Those things came from Europe and yet were assigned to people here. Normally, the first person they met, they called a king or a queen because that's how it would have been in Europe. So they projected everything upon the land here and the people. And that projection has been very destructive, and it continues today. And it continues in history books today. And of course, they're trying to ban all history now, but you know, it's not going to ever be banned.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're almost truth tellers.
Absolutely. Could you talk a little bit about what inspired you to kind of get into this field when you were younger?
I didn't get into the field when I was younger. I just discovered poetry.
Of course.
And I began writing it. I never made a plan that I was going to be a writer. I never made a plan that I was going to become a scholar. I just did it by accident. And I discovered an anthology of contemporary poetry. I worked with orthopedically handicapped children in a special ed program as a teacher's aide. And I loved my job. But when I discovered contemporary poetry, I started spending a lot of time trying to write. And then I took a class in creative writing. I sat in on a class at the university, and the professor was generous enough to allow that. And when I sat in on the class, before it was over, I had a book ready for publication. And it's been constant since then. I've gone on writing. I then had to learn how to write novels because I had never had a fiction class. And so I taught myself that. I've just continued with all the things I loved and wanted to do. And I think that's the key. If you really love it and you really want to do it, then it's good. Do it. But if you love something else more, you need to stay with that.
Absolutely. That's a really wonderful answer. I definitely feel some similarities in my practice as an artist. I feel like I didn't really decide to be a visual artist. It just kind of was something that I started doing. So kind of in that vein, I have a little bit of a longer question.
It's just an inborn thing for you too.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, on that same topic, I have a bit of a longer question. So as part of my senior thesis, I did some conservation research and created an art piece about the Carolina parakeet, which was the only species of parrot endemic in North America. And the parrot went extinct in 1904 in the wild due to settler destruction of its habitat. So as an homage, I kind of did an illustration of the bird. I don't know if we're able to put that on the screen. Yeah, there we go. So that's my illustration of the Carolina parakeet. Thank you very much. But I understand that there may be, of course, a similarity in my work as to yours. I know you had mentioned in a previous conversation that we'd had a little bit about the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker and how it kind of had a similar plight as the Carolina parakeet. And I would love to hear you elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, the ivory-billed woodpecker is called the holy grail of birds. People are still searching for it because they think that it's been seen. I wish we had a photo of it that you could put up here. They flew like ducks. They didn't fly like a regular like a regular bird. And so they became extinct mostly because of habitat destruction and deforestation in this country that took place. Germans were hired to do the deforestation, and they didn't want to. They thought that the places were too big and beautiful to destroy, but they had to. They had no choice. They were needing jobs. And mostly they lived in swamps, and they were our main bird. And also they lived around in the trees. They went to the trees around the mounds. And there were trees planted, black walnut trees were planted all around the main mound at Cahokia. And we came from the Mississippians, so I did a lot of research there, and there's no evidence that the black walnut trees now, there's no evidence that they were there. But they were there, and they're there for a reason. They repel pests. But the Ivory-Billed woodpeckers would come in there along with the heath hens and eat pests also that were in the area, but they mainly lived in swamplands. And that was land that was on 3 rivers, so there would have been swamps in that region.
Right, yeah. In my research about the Carolina parakeet, I found that they mostly lived in old growth forests, which were, oftentimes cut down by the settlers, and that's how they kind of met their demise. But so
they also have beautiful feathers that would have been in demand.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the parakeet as well. So kind of in that same vein. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, they definitely were made into brooches and hats and things like that. But on that same topic, the word for the Carolina parakeet in my tribal language is Mascowhinge. And my tribal language went extinct in the 1800s. I know that many other tribal languages are also in danger. And so as a poet and a writer, could you talk a little bit about your use of your language in your work and what it kind of means to you?
Well, our language is not extinct, and it's still spoken, sometimes by children in grocery stores who, when people who work there think, oh, look at that child, they speak French. And it's Chickasaw.
Boy.
But it's being used, it's conversational, it's still there. And our words for animal is non-okcha, which means all alive, all alive.
That's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So
And also, one of my favorite words is okchamali, and it has so many different meanings. If you take it apart as a word, the meanings of it are south flowing, okcha is water, and it has to do with the changes of color. It's also the word for blue and green. And so when I went canoeing down the Mississippi River, I understood why the word was both blue and green, in that it had to do with when the waters come out of the rivers and go into the Mississippi and change the color of the water. So, there were all kinds of meanings behind one word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I know in my language, many different endings were also added on to one word to change its meaning. And, you could end up with a very, very long word by the end of all that. But I would like to know, what is your favorite part about your practice and what you do? It's a very broad question.
I love to write. I love to do it. And it makes me happy to be able to have time to write. Sometimes there just isn't time anymore. There's so much other work that needs to be done, and it seems like I have to make time early in the morning, like at 5:30 or late at night. And so it's very difficult for writers and for artists, and especially for someone like you. You're a graduate student working on your other research.
Oh, I'm just an undergrad.
What?
I'm just an undergrad.
Well, whatever you are, you're a graduate student to me.
Thank you.
So, but our work, it's hard to juggle everything. And so it would be good if we just had all day to write. And sometimes I do have that. Sometimes I don't. And my life has recently changed drastically. So I haven't had a lot of time to write for several weeks. And lately I have had time again, and it's been really nice.
Definitely.
It's because I'm avoiding other work.
Oh, I do that too. So what advice would you give to a young artist or, a young conservationist who's maybe just starting out in either of those fields?
Whichever field, or combining them, as we have probably. I think you just have to be dedicated enough and love it enough to do it. You have to follow it. For me, writing is my teacher. It knows the way. It knows what I don't know. And so it will take me places, and it will say things that I would never have thought of or would say. So for me, that's the teacher, and I follow it. And I think you have to be in that frame of mind where you love it, you're going to want to do it, and you're going to learn from it, not be in control.
Yeah, absolutely. I oftentimes feel like I'm, not the one with the pencil in my hand. I feel like there's something else kind of guiding me. So I really appreciate you saying that. I think I'm going to ask just one more question before we kind of open things up to our audiences. So as kind of a last question, in a conversation we had previously, I remember you mentioning that you like being a literary artist because writing kind of allows people to create scenes in their heads as they read your work. Would you like to expand on this idea and kind of talk a little bit more about writing as a medium?
Well, we were just exchanging ideas about art and literature, and basically I was thinking that in a way the image of writing is visual, and sometimes it's visual to different visual for different people, but I like to try to make it as precise as I can so that they see what I see. I try to make it into what I guess you would call a painting, only with words.
Yeah, that absolutely comes through in your writing. It's very, very beautiful. So I think we're just going to open it up now to questions from our live audience, and then we'll kind of alternate with questions from our Zoom audience. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hands.
Maybe we need to ask people questions ourselves.
We've got one.
Oh, hello. I particularly loved the first poem you read about the silent language of the animals. I don't really have a question, but if you could say something more about that.
About working with the birds, you mean?
Well, I would have a question about the animals being teachers for you, and through a silent language.
I think we all communicate silently in ways we don't know, but the animal world has their own language with each other. They sometimes understand our language. And even so, there are things that are unspoken and yet communicated. We have a way of showing our care for them and our being that we maybe are not conscious of. And so there's an unconscious connection that takes place. And the birds, when I worked with the birds, well, some of them really loved humans, and some liked a certain human, and some hated a certain human. There was a new woman that came in one day, and she went in with several owls into a flight cage. And it never happened before, but one of them came down with its claw on top of her head and zoomed across her head. And it could have really harmed her, but it didn't. It knew better than to try to harm somebody. But it warned her that she was wrong. She was wrong to be there. And so whenever I am with animals, and I've worked with different kinds of wildlife, I've found that it's very important how I carry myself, how I put myself into a certain state before I'm in their presence. And the thing is, too often we want something from the animals and we don't give back. And I worked in a zoo once, and people wanted recognition. Businessmen would bring their children in, and the men would still be wearing suits, and they'd be trying to get eye contact with an animal. And I thought, this is so lonely that we're so desperate to be recognized by an animal as an okay person. And that's not the way to communicate. Usually that's a threat. Eye contact with an animal is usually a threat. I'm sorry, I heard somebody say something.
Yeah, people are just agreeing generally.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're going to take a question from the Zoom audience now.
We do not have any.
Okay, never mind. Oh, it looks like we have another question here.
A lot of your work has to do with injustices by people against other people or against animals. How do you feel in terms of a person actually being an animal? What is it that gives human beings moral agency that we don't put upon animals? We don't say that a hawk acted wrongly to, I don't know, steal baby birds out of some other bird's nest or anything like that. But with human beings, we do feel some moral responsibility or some sense of goodwill or justice. What is it? What is that line that divides us from the rest of the animal kingdom?
There is no line. We just believe in it.
That's what
We are animals. We are just a part of everything else. We have a sense of ourselves as supreme and superior, and it's not true. And yes, one bird might eat the eggs of another bird, and that would be a cycle of life that we don't have any moral control over. And that doesn't mean that we can think that that bird is bad or wrong. It's done what it does. And as we do what we do. And I do not think that we are. I think I am working on a piece now called My Life as an Animal. So maybe I'll answer it later in that. But we don't have any moral supremacy over them. We don't have it over each other either.
All right, do we have any Zoom questions in the chat, or are we going? Okay, we need another audience member to ask a question.
Actually, I'm thinking maybe we do have moral supremacy over each other because there are evil people in the world, and in some ways we need to control that. I have to change my comment a little bit. If I could stop a war, I would.
Okay. I actually have one last question before we wrap up that I was curious about. Linda, I was just wondering how long does it take you to come up with your poems? You know, is it like a very varied time scale? Does it take you quite a long time sometimes and a short time other times, or is it pretty constant?
No, it's exactly that. Sometimes not very long, sometimes very, very long. Sometimes I write, I have to put it away for a long time, like months or longer. Sometimes I find things I started years ago and then I work on them.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes for me as well. That's why I was wondering. But I think that's going to be all for our questions, so I'm just going to pass things off.
We have one in the chat if we want.
Oh, just kidding. We have one question in the chat.
So it reads, thanks for reading these selections. I notice you use the phrase new human accord and references to the relationship between people and nature. How should we understand this agreement and how is it changing?
How do we understand the agreement of creating something new? And it's not new, it's ancient. It's the oldest way of thinking on the continent. We have to go back and look at the European American way of thinking that was laid over the traditional ways of looking at the world earlier, which means you will have to study some of those things that are earlier, and not the easy to read ones that are bestsellers. You have to work harder and deeper at it.
All right, I think that's going to be all for our questions today. Thank you so much, Linda. I just wanted to say Kena, that's thank you in my language, and I'm just going to pass things off.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Linda. And I wanted to say, oh, did she go? Oh, well, anyway. Oh, hi, Linda. So in one of the sessions today, they talked that there is a paper coming out saying that they have sightings of the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker.
Yes. And everybody's been seeing the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker, they think.
Yes, and so there's a team that's got...
They can't prove it.
Well, no, they actually have sightings, and there's an article in The Guardian that Steve Latta from the National Aviary in Pittsburgh and a team of scientists, they've got it, it's not yet peer-reviewed, but they're coming out, this was from 3 days ago, they're coming out with a paper, so here's hoping is what I'm thinking.
That would be wonderful. I'd like to think that's true since they were so special to us. And the thing is, they also became their beaks became trade items later after they were shot and killed. If that's the case, I'd love to see the pictures.
Yeah, right.
Because there are a lot of books that are out about people having seen it, and nobody has a documentary or a document of it. I hope you're right.
I hope so too. That's what somebody said today. There's an article in The Guardian saying that this might be coming out, and hopefully let's hope and
I'll read
pray.
that Guardian article, and I hope that they see the Carolina parakeet too.
Your words to God's ears. So, and thank you, Linda, and thank you, Olivia. And tonight we do have more readings. We have a wonderful performance still to come, including performances by Allison Rollins, Marianne Baruch, Adjoa Gargi Nzinga, and Alberto Rios. So we'll just take a few minutes pause to transition into the next performance. We'll return shortly, so please stay with us. And thank you, team.